We are now past the second anniversary of Putin's full-scale aggression against Ukraine. What was supposed to be a short, victorious war has turned into a protracted and bloody war, killing thousands of people and destroying dozens of Ukrainian towns. In February, Russia captured Avdiivka, scoring its most significant win since the capture of Bakhmut 9 months prior. The lack of American support has started to have a very tangible impact on Ukraine's ability to defend against the Russian army, which is once again enjoying a significant firepower advantage. Welcome to another update on the war in Ukraine and the events of February 2024. This video is made available for free thanks to our YouTube members and patrons. We fund our free content through our program of exclusive videos made for our members and patrons, who get 2 documentaries per week not available to the public. We've got a growing collection featuring the First Punic War, the history of Prussia, the Italian Unification Wars, and a review of the classic text Xenophon's Anabasis. We're now covering the Russo-Japanese War and Albigensian Crusades, not to mention our massive Pacific War week-by-week coverage, and a massive pool of other projects. All this is made for and with generous donations from our backers. So if you're enjoying our content and want to see more and support the cause of history, consider becoming a YouTube member or patron. You'll also get early access to public content, a spot in our lively Discord server, and behind-the-scenes info and goodies. We rely on our backers to support our growing team pumping out these videos, so thank you to everyone already involved, and we hope you'll consider joining in too. The Russian army still carries strategic momentum on the battlefield. They are attacking on the Zaporizhia, North Luhansk, and Donbas fronts. They made significant gains in Donbas in February. Russia has been attacking Avdiivka since October, and has been making only incremental progress until February, when they finally made the breakthrough they've been fighting for. At the beginning of the month, they captured the northern Dacha quarter of the town. On February 13th, the Russians severed Industrial Avenue, a key supply line between Avdiivka and its coke plant. It was reported that one of the main Ukrainian strongholds in the section, Zenith, was practically surrounded. At this point, the situation was getting increasingly dire for the Ukrainian units in Avdiivka. The Ukrainians were suffering from an extreme shortage of ammunition, thanks to American inaction and European slowness. According to the New York Times report, the Ukrainians had been forced to ration their artillery shells, and in Avdiivka, this allowed the Russians to take advantage. Shell hunger had forced the Ukrainians to fire artillery only on large masses of attacking Russian soldiers. So instead, the Russians started attacking in very small infantry groups, and the Ukrainians simply could not afford to use their depleted shell reserves on them. At the same time, the Russians carpet-bombed the Ukrainians in Avdiivka with their glide bombs. The Ukrainian command was forced to withdraw the 110th Mechanized Brigade from the Avdiivka sector, which had been defending it since October 10th due to losses. Instead, the 3rd Assault Brigade was brought in. But at this point, Ukrainian defenses were crumbling, and instead of pushing back the Russian forces and counterattacking, all the reinforcements could do was to protect the orderly withdrawal of as many Ukrainian soldiers as possible. On February 17th, the Russian army completed the capture of Avdiivka, after taking control over the remaining supply lines into the town. Most Ukrainian soldiers managed to get out of Avdiivka, but a few hundred are estimated to be captured by the Russians or have gone missing. After almost 5 months of fighting, and after losing hundreds of tanks and armored vehicles, Russia finally captured Avdiivka. Nationalist Russian military blogger Andrei Morozov, who a few days after making this statement committed suicide, claimed that the Russian army lost 16,000 men in the battle for Avdiivka KIA. But even though it was a costly victory for the Russians, it was a victory nonetheless. Lack of artillery shells for the Ukrainians, the air superiority the Russians managed to achieve, particularly towards the end of the battle, the fact the Russians managed to go through Ukrainian fortifications by using tunnels, and the numerical advantage that they had are among the main reasons behind the capture of Avdiivka. In the following days, the Russians pushed on to capture Stepova, Severna, and Lestokina to develop their success. But according to Ukrainian sources, towards the end of February, the AFU managed to stabilize the front line on the Tonenka-Olivka-Berdichi line. In this period, the Russian army also captured part of Pobeda and made minor progress around Ivanivska, Mariinka, and Krasnohorivka. The capture of Donbas is the minimum goal of the Putin regime at this point, and although they are still far from it, they are pushing on in various directions as we speak, trying to take advantage of Ukraine's shell shortage. The Russian army has also launched an offensive on the Zaporizhia front to regain lost ground during Ukraine's summer counteroffensive. The Ukrainian command claims that they have gathered even more personnel in the Robotyne salient than they did for the Avdiivka offensive. On February 17th, they started attacking and gained some ground southwest of Verbove. On February 24th, they made a breakthrough to recapture most of Robotyne, but apparently they have not been able to solidify their positions and lost the ground they had initially gained. Despite all their efforts, the Russians could not achieve a breakthrough on the North Luhansk front in February either. They have made incremental gains near Terny and Yampolivka, but the Russian army is still banging its head against the Ukrainian defences east of Kupiansk, which is their key axis of attack on this front. Also, the back and forth in Krynki continues. Shoigu has claimed that the Russians have recaptured this settlement on the left bank of the Dnipro, but this is not the case. But they have regained some of the earlier lost positions. The Ukrainian naval infantry has yet to achieve a breakthrough there to create a workable bridgehead, despite months of heavy and costly fighting. Clearly, the Ukrainian army is in a difficult spot at this point. This is arguably the hardest situation they have faced since the first 6 months of the war. The Russians are not making quick gains and achieving lightning-fast breakthroughs, but they have the momentum and look more comfortable in the current war of attrition. The US National Security Advisor John Kirby has already blamed the capture of Avdiivka and the current situation on the battlefield on congressional inaction. Senior US defense officials have told ABC that by late March, the shell shortage for the Ukrainian army may become critical. They also estimate that Ukraine's lack of air defense may cause complete Russian air superiority, which completely changes the nature of this fight. President Zelensky agrees that 2024 will be a decisive year for the war, and he argues that it will dictate the way this war ends. So if the United States does not pass the Ukraine aid bill, the situation may become even worse for Kyiv. But Ukraine also has a manpower disadvantage. Sources have talked about the numerical advantage the Russian army had in Avdiivka as one of the main causes of Ukrainian difficulties in this battle. According to Zelensky, at this point, the Russian army has a manpower advantage of 7-1. It is somewhat baffling that even though the lack of personnel is commonly accepted as one of the main problems for the Ukrainian army at this point, the decision on new mobilization has not been adopted yet. For months, the Ukrainian government and the parliament have been negotiating and discussing how a potential mobilization may look, but the final decision has not been made against the background of concerns of negative reaction of the opposition and the public. Remember, despite what the Russian propaganda tells you, Ukraine is still a democracy, and there is significant opposition to the incumbent government in the parliament. After months of speculation, Zelensky finally changed the commander-in-chief of the AFU on February 8th. General Valery Zaluzhny was dismissed from his post in favor of the commander of ground forces Alexander Syrsky. The Russian propaganda has been busy stoking rumors of discord between Zelensky and Zaluzhny, but these two symbols of Ukrainian resistance made sure to create good optics for such a difficult moment. Zelensky gave Zaluzhny the Hero of Ukraine award and commended him for his service, while talking about the importance of renewal. Syrsky is an experienced commander, but there have been reports about him not being that popular among the Ukrainian soldiers. He has been criticized for relying on old Soviet military methods. But some of his deputies are from a new wave of Ukrainian military officers, which indicates that the Ukrainian military is not going to suddenly go back to the old Soviet playbook. Syrsky largely reiterated Zaluzhny's vision of the short-term goals of the Ukrainian army, including the importance of gaining a technological advantage over the adversary. He is also tasked with conducting an audit of the Ukrainian troops to determine the number of servicemen in the rear who can be sent to battle, in order to determine the scope of mobilization that the Ukrainian army needs. Even though Russia has made tangible progress on the ground in February, Ukraine continued inflicting painful losses on the Russian Navy and the Air Force. They destroyed 2 Russian vessels this month, but most importantly, another rare A-50 long-range radar detection aircraft was destroyed on February 22nd, which was hit by a modified S-200 air defense missile. These planes are crucial for Russia's air defense and attack operations, as they help detect enemy missiles and aviation from a significant range. And now Russia only has 6 of these planes left, according to the HUR chief Kirilo Budinov. Along with helping on the battlefield, these actions, particularly the significant weakening of the Russian Black Sea Fleet, have also enabled Ukraine to export its produce via maritime routes more confidently. Ukrainian sources report that in January, Ukraine exported 12 million tons of goods, 8.7 million of which were via the Black Sea. This equals the pre-war numbers of Ukraine. Western sanctions have so far failed to prevent Russia from ramping up its domestic military production. Russia suffers heavy losses of equipment daily, but the Kremlin remains confident of the capacity of its military-industrial complex to cover for these losses. Controversial reports and claims about its current production capacity continue surfacing in the news. Putin recently stated that Russia has expanded its military production, and currently 6,000 enterprises and 3.5 million workers are working in the Russian military-industrial complex. According to the Ukrainian military expert Konstantin Mashevets, at this point, Russia is capable of producing 250 to 300 new or modernized tanks per year. Along with that, Russia can produce an additional 250 to 300 tanks annually by using parts of damaged tanks. The Latvian Defense Ministry official Yanis Garrisons gives a different figure. According to him, Russia has the capacity to produce and repair 100 to 150 tanks per month, which is consistent with Dmitry Medvedev's claim of the Russian capacity to produce 1,500 main battle tanks per year, an average production of 125 tanks monthly. Another Ukrainian military expert, Alexander Kovalenko, argued that the main tank producer in Russia, the Uralvagonzavod, produces only 60 to 70 T-90 tanks per year, while the remaining tanks sent to the front are somewhat modernized T-54-55 and T-62 tanks. Finally, Mashevets has also stated that the official statistics from Russia demonstrate that after hitting a peak in September 2023, Russian military production has consistently declined ever since due to the lack of skilled labor and decreased supply from Chinese companies. It is extremely difficult to determine the real number of tanks and armored vehicles that Russia can produce at this moment, but so far we have not seen any evidence of tank shortages in the Russian army, despite visually documented extremely heavy losses. The Kremlin does not only work on expanding its military potential, but it is also unsurprisingly plotting ways to destabilize Ukraine. On February 17th, the Washington Post published an article based on documents obtained from the Kremlin, which described the work of Russian trolls to promote the Russian narratives regarding the war in Ukraine on social media. These narratives include posts about the perceived conflict between Zelensky and Zelensky, the latter's intention to replace the incumbent president, amplifying claims of corruption in the Ukrainian elite, in general, everything that can sow discord in Ukrainian society and demoralize it. The non-stop propaganda about Ukrainian problems has undoubtedly given talking points to pro-Russian forces in Western countries as well, aimed at reducing and even downright halting the military support to Kyiv. This strategy is working, at least to some extent, in the West. In America, Trumpist politicians, journalists, and public figures often parrot Russian narratives to find different ways of preventing the adoption of the Ukrainian aid bill in Congress, which has been creating significant problems for the AFU. Even though the Senate has passed the Ukraine aid bill, the House of Representatives remains the problem. In the absence of American aid, the European countries have been trying to step up. On February 1st, the European Council adopted a Ukraine support package of 50 billion euros, which will aid the Ukrainian economy until 2027. The EU official Josep Borrell once again reiterated the organization's intent to deliver the earlier promised 1 million artillery shells by the end of 2024. Needless to say, Ukraine needs as many shells as possible as soon as possible to decrease the current overwhelming advantage that the Russian army enjoys. On February 17th, Czech President Pavel stated that they had found 500,000 155mm and 300,000 122mm artillery shells in unspecified countries, which can be sent to Ukraine within weeks in case of funding. Later, FT reported that the EU member states are working to fulfill this idea, which requires $1.5 billion. This would be absolutely massive for Ukraine at this point. On February 3rd, it was reported that Estonia delivered Javelin anti-tank guns, ammunition, and other equipment worth 80 million euros to Kyiv. On February 5th, the Dutch Defense Minister Keizer Ollongren stated that the Netherlands will send 6 additional F-16 fighters to Ukraine, bringing the total number to 24. Denmark, Norway, and Belgium have also pledged an unspecified number of F-16s to Ukraine, although the Norwegian media has speculated that Norway is going to send 5 to 10 jets. On the same day, the German Rheinmetall announced that they are going to send tens of thousands of 155mm artillery shells, dozens of Marder IFVs, 25 Leopard A1A5 tanks, and Skynex air defense systems to Ukraine. The South Korean government also stated that it's going to sign a contract on 155mm shell production with the Punsang military manufacturer. Some have suggested that they're going to do it for the purpose of later supplying Ukraine through indirect transfer. On February 14th, during the latest Ramstein meeting, Ukraine's allies made further pledges of support. NATO chief Stoltenberg stated that the allies are planning to send 1 million drones to Ukraine, along with creating a mine clearance coalition for the transfer of relevant equipment. Britain and Latvia are going to lead the effort to transfer these drones. It is reported that the Netherlands, Britain and Canada have already started sending their drones to Ukraine. German and French defense ministers signed an agreement to create the Air and Missile Coalition. Germany also pledged to send 77 Mancat-1A1 trucks, small drone bombs, medical equipment, and an unspecified number of MRAP armoured vehicles worth €100 million. Spain promised to transfer M113 armoured personnel carriers, air defence systems, and other equipment and vehicles to Ukraine. Lastly, Australia sent an aid package worth $50 million. On the following day, Zelensky visited Germany to meet the German Chancellor Scholz to sign a security deal with Berlin. On that day, Scholz announced a new military aid package worth €1.13 billion, which includes 18 Panzerhaubitze howitzers, 18 RCH-155 self-propelled artillery guns, 2 Skynex air defense systems, 100 Iris-T air defense missiles, and 120,000 122mm artillery shells. This aid will be sent until 2027, with shells arriving in 2024. It is not clear whether the aforementioned aid is just the repetition of the previously announced aid by Germany or something new. Berlin is also going to send military aid worth €7.1 billion in total in 2024. On the same day, Zelensky also visited Paris and signed a similar security agreement with France. President Macron promised military aid worth €3 billion in 2024. On February 20th, Sweden announced a military aid package worth $683 million, which includes air defense, ammunition, grenade launchers, armored vehicles, and so on. Denmark has also pledged further military aid worth €1.8 billion to be sent to Ukraine this year, along with signing a security agreement with Ukraine on February 22nd. It includes 15,000 155mm shells produced together with Czechia, air defense and demining equipment, radar, and so on. New Zealand announced a new aid package worth $15.4 million, while Britain pledged 200 Brimstone anti-tank missiles, along with a further £245 million to deliver artillery shells to Ukraine. On February 26, Germany announced another military aid package pledging 14,000 155mm artillery shells, 10 Vector drones, 4 Visent-1 demining vehicles, and so on. A day later, the Netherlands pledged a further €100 million in aid. It is a decent amount of aid, which has had a significant focus on shells. But Ukraine will need both the United States and the European Union to step up their efforts if they want to ensure at least parity with Russia. In his interview, Zelensky acknowledged that the fate of Ukraine and the war depended on its Western allies. He confirmed that Ukraine has received only a third of the promised shells from the EU, adding that due to the war, the price of shells has increased significantly. Zelensky added that the presidential election in the USA will be a decisive moment, probably meaning that Trump's election may stop any hope for aid from America. American defense officials have already confirmed that the United States has increased shell production and are planning to produce 60,000 155mm shells per month by the end of the year. At least some of it will be sent to Ukraine, of course, if Congress approves the Ukraine aid bill. One of the most controversial news items relating to foreign aid to Ukraine was the statement of the French President Macron saying, "We will do everything that we must do so that Russia does not win," not even ruling out sending troops to Ukraine. Later, the NATO allies downplayed this statement, while Putin responded with his usual nuclear saber-rattling. The French Prime Minister Attal later clarified that France is not planning to send its soldiers to fight in the war, but they can be deployed to protect border areas and participate in military exercises or ground air defense. The German Chancellor Scholz has already revealed that the French and the British are helping the Ukrainian army with target control while using Storm Shadow or Scalp-PG missiles. As usual, there is less information on foreign military assistance to Russia, both because Russia has fewer allies and since the Kremlin is very secretive about these deals. Russia is primarily relying on its own domestic production, but continues to be supported by a few of its allies. The Prana network hackers have claimed to access documents of the Iran Revolutionary Guard Corps, which indicate that Russia pays $193,000 for every Shahed 136 drone, and $1.4 million for Shahed 238. This price is higher than initially estimated, but Russia is mitigating this issue by producing their own version of Shahed drones now. According to Reuters, Iran has also apparently sold Russia almost 400 surface-to-surface missiles, with ranges between 300 and 700 kilometers. Iranian officials speaking anonymously to Reuters have confirmed this report, while Budanov has stated that they have not seen any Iranian missiles in the war yet. Earlier, it was reported that North Korea has sent some 1 million artillery shells to Russia, but the Bloomberg report claims that they have actually sent them 6,700 containers with 3,152mm shells. This is a huge number, and if true, it may be one of the causes of the huge disparity in shell usage at this point in the war. Finally, on February 9th, Ukrainian soldiers reported about the use of Starlink satellite devices by Russian forces, while the Ukrainian media claimed that they had purchased them via Dubai. Elon Musk has already refuted the claim that SpaceX has sold them directly to Russia. One of the main talking points related to the war in Ukraine was Putin's interview with Tucker Carlson. We're not going to go over everything that Putin said, since it was mostly the repetition of his previous statements about Ukraine. The important point is that particularly the passage on his version of Ukrainian history demonstrates that Putin's obsession goes way beyond NATO expansion or a pro-Western government in Kyiv. It is an outright rejection of Ukrainian identity and statehood. People acting like Putin is open to fair negotiations with Ukraine rather than seeking its surrender and submission must bear that in mind. Medvedev also once threatened Kyiv, Berlin, London and Washington with a nuclear strike if Ukraine restored its territorial integrity. Also, in the true spirit of diplomacy, the former president of Russia argued that Kyiv must be captured by Russia and all Ukrainian citizens who harm Russia must be exposed, punished, sent to Siberia for re-education in forced labor camps. Russia creates the visibility of openness to negotiations, also thanks to its massive social media presence and its friends in Western politics and media, while not backing down from its maximalist goals. The recent success of the Russian army on the battlefield only strengthens their determination. The recent Reuters report about Putin's proposal to the United States to reach a ceasefire in Ukraine is based on 3 Russian sources. According to this claim, the United States refused this offer as they did not want to get involved in talks without Ukraine's participation. But both an unnamed US official privately and then the Kremlin spokesperson Peskov publicly denied this report. Russia's imperial and revisionist ambitions do not end with Ukraine. Moldova has long been the focus of Kremlin-orchestrated smear campaigns. Remember, another Russia-backed breakaway region, Transnistria, is in Moldova. There are Russian troops in this entity, and on February 28th, the separatist authorities of Transnistria officially asked Russia for help to protect Transnistria under the circumstances of stronger pressure from Moldova. Usually, Russia uses the pretext of helping fellow Russians or allies persecuted in another country. This is directly from the Kremlin's playbook of aggression. Attacking Moldova while not having direct land access to this country is improbable, but this development is quite worrying. Unfortunately for Ukraine and the Western coalition in general, despite earlier agreements by the governments, Polish farmers and pro-Russian activists in Poland have not stopped blocking the Polish-Ukrainian border. Polish farmers have been protesting the import of cheaper Ukrainian grain, and many in Ukraine recognize this as a legitimate grievance. But since then, the governments agreed that Poland would serve as a transit for the transportation of the Ukrainian grain to other countries, and despite the assurances of the Polish authorities, the issue has not been resolved. The problem escalated further when protesters spilled the Ukrainian grain on the ground, after which Ukraine demanded punishment for the perpetrators of the action. The new president of Poland, Donald Tusk, has announced that Poland is considering closing its border with Ukraine, while Zelensky stated that Ukraine is determined to protect its business. Grain exports are crucial for Ukraine, as are cordial relations with its closest ally, Poland. It is the most inopportune moment for a crisis like this, and the sides look further apart on the issue than they were just a few weeks before. By winning the Battle of Avdiivka, Russia gained its biggest victory on the battlefield since the capture of Bakhmut. The ammunition shortage due to persisting problems with supply from its allies is very damaging for Ukraine at this point. Ukraine is looking to weather the storm and stabilize its defenses before the arrival of crucial military aid, and will be on the defensive, at least in the short term. Meanwhile, Russia intends to push on and develop its success in Donbas. After the first time since the start of the war, Zelensky talked about Ukrainian losses. He claimed that 31,000 Ukrainian soldiers have died in this war. But UALosses.org, a platform calculating Ukrainian losses based on publicly available information, already has evidence of more than 42,000 Ukrainian KIA. According to the New York Times, the most recent Pentagon estimate of Russian losses is 60,000 dead. The numbers of claimed losses continue to fluctuate wildly. Now let's look at the visually confirmed equipment losses suffered by both sides, compiled by the Oryx blog. As of March 1st, Russia has lost at least 2,764 tanks, 5,860 vehicles, 274 command posts and communication stations, 1,145 artillery systems and vehicles, 353 multiple rocket launchers, 105 aircraft, 135 helicopters, and 350 drones. Ukraine has lost at least 749 tanks, 2,403 vehicles, 18 command posts and communication stations, 507 artillery systems and vehicles, 56 multiple rocket launchers, 80 aircraft, 38 helicopters, and 290 drones. More videos on the topic are on the way, so make sure you have subscribed and pressed the bell button. Please consider liking, subscribing, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Recently, we've started releasing weekly Patreon and YouTube member exclusive content. Consider joining their ranks via the link in the description or button under the video to watch these weekly videos, learn about our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our private Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.